a time there was truth in journalism, where brave men and women gave voice to the voiceless. But then the corporations bought the journalist, poisoning the news that we are fed. With those tainted sources, all we ever ate was a steady diet of status quo. This hijacked narrative hid the truth of mass suffering, injustice, and corruption throughout our land. Status quo, status quo, status quo, status quo. To expose this shift to oligarchy came a band of honest journalists. They left the studio and hit the streets to give the microphone back to the people. From sea to sea, the people were empowered to share their truth. Their voices no longer stifled, reclaimed their power. Join the media revolution now.
Live on Thursday, April 29th, 2020. Hope everyone's having a lovely day. Apologies, I've been off the air on and off for the last few weeks. Still kind of, I would say, recovering from coronavirus. I get better and then my cough comes back. So I've been trying not to push myself too hard. Don't want to, obviously, make this thing linger. So that's why certain days when my cough is really bad, I've been, not going live. But still working in the background. We broke another story today on the Flint water investigation, which we will get to in a bit. I actually believe, as I'm going live, the Attorney General of Michigan is actually tweeting in response to our story, which is always interesting. It's kind of interesting when you reach out to politicians and elected officials before you publish a story. They won't respond to you, or they give you a response that's kind of not a response. But then after you publish the story, then they publicly go on Twitter and do other things. So kind of strange that, the Attorney General of Michigan is doing that now, but we'll get into it a little bit later. I hope everyone is doing okay. The sad news that we have now passed 60,000 deaths related to the coronavirus here in America, obviously much more than that globally. We are now over 1 million cases in America. So, it's truly, truly insane. All this talk about reopening businesses and the economy restarting as the death count climbs higher and higher and higher. It is madness. It's also truly insane. Just the total exposure and revelations that the emperor and the empress have no clothes. Congress, Trump, Biden, all of them are showing you that it doesn't even matter that there's a pandemic going on. It doesn't even matter that 20 million people are out of work, probably more than that. Doesn't matter. Crumbs for you, cake for the corporations. Now Trump trying to push meat workers to go back to work, to stay in their plants, even though they're getting actively sick and dying because of coronavirus. So we'll get into all of it. Remember to press that like button. We already have 200 people watching. 99 of you have pressed that like button, so I need another 100 of you to press that like button. It's the thumbs up button right under the video. Also want to give a shout out for those of you that haven't seen, we just kind of took our GoFundMe out of retirement because obviously, like many companies, coronavirus is affecting us. We've lost a good amount of members, so we are dusting off the old GoFundMe. We passed our goal of 85,000 a while ago. So we stopped promoting the GoFundMe because we met our goal, but we just raised it. So we are now trying to get to $110,000, which will definitely help us, hold us over for a little bit while we can't travel because of coronavirus. We got an amazing donation of $2,000 a couple days ago. Yeah, she's not anonymous. Isabel DeBlue from the UK. So thank you so much, Isabel. I mean, it's just... Oh, did she leave something in the super chat? Thank you so much, Isabel. That is incredible, the amount, that contribution to us. It really, really makes a big difference, and we appreciate it over there across the pond. Thank you, thank you, thank you to the other donors. We're now $6 away from hitting 98,000 and then on. So we'll be, you know, obviously feel free, if it's easier for you, you can do super chats, but GoFundMe is appreciated too. And did we just get another donation? Oh my God, Jacqueline, 200 pounds out in the UK. I'll tell you, across the pond, they are very generous. No, it's not the same person. Oh, thank you. Maybe it is the same person. Thank you. 200 pounds. What is the intro music, please? Love the piano. Hope all is well. And Jordan's cough is better. We're getting there. It gets better and then it comes back. From what I hear, coronavirus doesn't, you know, it doesn't just leave. It kind of lingers for a while, but I'm a lot luckier than other people. Thank you so much for the 200 pounds. The music is actually an amazing opera singer, my friend Carmen, who made that song just for us. I think she's still building her website. I have to talk to her about that because we obviously want to credit her. So when she does build her website, we'll be giving her a proper shout out. Weldon, 1999. Jordan, I've supported you from the beginning. I admire your dedication, especially in the face of just adversity and lack of funding support. My wife and I will help pay for as long as you are up. We need you and more like you. Weldon, I'm gonna keep on going. And shout out to Jen too, who's been doing great videos and has been working with me on all these bombshell Flint stories. Andrew, 499. Here you go, Jordan. Thank you. All right, let's get to it. Jen's been doing good videos on the updates of the Tara Reade story, which obviously has been out there in independent media for, I think at this point, like a month and a half. Katie Halper, who's an independent podcaster, she does her own podcast as well as with Matt Taibbi on Rolling Stone. First interviewed Tara, then Ryan Grimm broke a story, and those two have been sticking on it. And then finally, the corporate media has really been pushed and forced, really, to cover this. You know, I'm just going to keep it real. Jen's not going to like me saying this. My girlfriend's not going to like me saying this, but I always keep it real. Obviously, the elephant in the room, you know, I was smeared many years ago, so in relation to the Me Too movement. I still support the Me Too movement, obviously, but I think more people, now that it's a couple years later, are realizing, you know, there has to be some balance. We can't just believe everything, whether it's from a woman making the accusation, a man, whatever. We have to be inclined to want to hear out people who claim that they were harassed or assaulted, but we also need to know, you know, the dynamic, the context, you know, witnesses, corroboration, all those things. I think two things could be true, right? Believe, you know, be inclined to believe people, but let's hear the facts and the evidence. So Tara Reade worked in Senator Biden's office in the early 90s. She obviously came out along with other women, I think it was last year, talking about that Biden had, you know, not so much assaulted them, but made them uncomfortable, you know, invading their personal space, kind of like, you know, kissing their neck and touching their hair and things like that. Biden at the time apologized for this. And hold on, turn my phone off, where they kind of just, Biden said, oh, you know, I come from an older generation where that was okay, I apologize, now I know that's not okay. There's also the matter of, you know, all the video of him sniffing children's hair, but we won't get into that right now. So Tara Reade came out, you know, then as the primary campaign with Bernie and Biden went on, Tara Reade came out with, you know, a further accusation, which is assault, that she was bringing her, Joe Biden's, then Senator Biden's gym bag to him, and he pushed her up against a wall and took his finger and, you know, against her will, penetrated her with his finger. And then after she rebuffed him, said something like, you know, you're nothing to me, or something like this. The truth is, I don't know if it's true. If you take your anti-Biden goggles off for a second and just look at the facts, forget what you think of Biden politically, I don't know if it's true. I certainly don't. I wasn't there. just like in most of these cases, we weren't there. I believe we should not judge harassment or assault allegations based on if we have a pre-existing bias against the person. Because a lot of people, for example, thought negative things about me because maybe I turned them off for some reason as a person, and judge me guilty by tweet, when I wasn't. So we have to look at things credibly. So if you look at it, we know that 7 or 8 women came out saying Joe Biden, touched them or invaded their personal space. So we know that Biden, and we've seen it on video, is a touchy-feely guy. Now, early 1990s, Joe Biden was in his, what would that be? He's 77 now, so that's 30 years ago, early 40s. So this is a, relatively young, well-known senator who might have had an affinity for younger women at the time, who might have misread signals and thought a woman was interested in him. Even if she was at the time, still would be inappropriate to do what he did if he did it. But when I look at things, I don't know if it's true. I don't know if Joe Biden did this or didn't do it. But what I do know is the Biden campaign is acting extremely fishy about it. They are also trying to essentially stop certain records from getting out that could further corroborate what Tara Reade is saying. Because it's not just the allegation of assault, it's the allegation of retribution when she spoke up. We still don't know why, according to Joe Biden's office, why is it that around the same time frame Tara Reade says this assault happened, why was she demoted from his office? There are interns on the record saying all of a sudden she wasn't managing us anymore. And then soon after that, she was no longer in the office. We don't have the reason. In most cases, companies or politicians will hide behind the cloak of, well, we don't discuss personnel matters or something like this. Well, Joe Biden's running for president. He's right now in the final 2. Obviously, there's movements going on, drop out Biden and those things. But at the moment, he's in the final 2. So that's not explained. Why was she demoted? Why was she removed? And most importantly, and I think the media has to answer for this, why is it that Joe Biden himself has not said a word about this? I don't really care what his deputy campaign manager said, issuing a statement about it, I think a month ago, saying, this never happened, blah, 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 blah. No. If you're a presidential candidate, and by the way, to be fair, it might not be true. There's potential that it's somewhere in the middle. Maybe it's not exactly how she described it, but something did happen that does rise to the level of unwanted advances. Sometimes, it's not black or white, it's gray. So I don't want to, with my blinders on, because I don't, it's not a secret what I think about Joe Biden politically. I don't want to pass judgment, but I will pass judgment on the fact, can you imagine if Bernie Sanders was the Democratic nominee right now, or the presumptive Democratic nominee, and the media had not asked him one question about a woman claiming in the early 90s he pushed her against the wall, digitally penetrated her, and then when she rebuffed him said, what? You're nothing to me. And then she got demoted from his Senate office? Oh my God. Neera Tanden would be calling for an FBI investigation. I don't know what the statute of limitations are on that. Oh my God. Can you imagine third way? They would be calling for Bernie Sanders to be jailed. But Joe Biden, I don't have the exact count, interview after interview after interview, while all of these outlets knew about it, he hasn't been asked one question about this. In fact, Bernie Sanders was asked about this before Joe Biden. Potential vice presidential nominees, Kamala Harris, Stacey Abrams, who, let's be honest here, is really lobbying publicly for this position. Hey, credit to her. I'm all for publicly lobbying. Don't hide it. She's pushing for it. And basically said, believe women, but, I'm with Joe. Same thing with Kamala. You got this mix of women should be able to tell their stories, but we let her tell her story, and now, let's move on. That's basically what we're getting. Same thing with Klobuchar, who, by the way, if I haven't announced it yet, is my pick for vice president. Not in terms of who I want to be vice president. I think that's who he's going to pick. We could get into that another time. By the way, we got almost 400 people watching. 220 of you have pressed that like button. I need another 200 of you to smash that like button. Thank you very much, Lawrence, for the GoFundMe donation. Darlene, 1 day ago, $100, $6 away from 98,000 raised on our GoFundMe. So we really, really appreciate it. Keep those coming, and keep the love keep coming in the super chat. So let's get into this. And by the way, credit to Katie Halper, who really broke this. And Tara Reade, again, I don't know where the truth lies. I don't know if it's true, but I do know if you are running for president, if you're the Democratic nominee, you should be asked about this, and you better have a damn good answer. Because remember, the corporate media, who obviously is in the tank for Joe Biden, we've seen that the entire primary, they basically hid behind, well, we've been investigating it in the background, but we weren't going to just publish the fact that there is an accusation. And they said, well, there's no on-the-record corroboration. Well, now there is quite a lot of corroboration. Not whether it happened or not, just corroboration that Tara Reade told other people about this pretty much right after it happened. Not just her brother, her mother, who, in a really, really revealing showcase, CNN was beaten to that. Somebody else broke the fact that Tara Reade's mother had called into Larry King Live. Yes, she didn't say Joe Biden's name. She didn't say what happened because her daughter didn't want her to. But she did call in saying, a prominent senator, there were problems that, my daughter wasn't, nobody took it seriously or did anything for her. So there is corroboration. And now a neighbor came out, a neighbor of Tara's, saying in the early 90s, she broke down, revealing this story, telling her the exact same story she's been telling other people. So at the end, when there's smoke, there's fire. Again, he might have not done this, or some version of it happened. I'm a man, and I don't want to speak for anything having to do with assault victims or anything like that. I don't know the psychology. I don't know what happens. I don't know, I don't know, and I don't want to say anything insensitive. I'm not saying she's lying. All I'm saying is we don't know. But what I do know is it's a disgrace that Biden has been, the media let him off the hook for lying about being arrested at apartheid South Africa. Anybody else, especially Bernie, would have been politically excoriated for that. They let him off the hook for lying about being on the front lines of civil rights sit-ins. Nothing. They've let him off the hook for a whole host of things. But now, Biden's campaign, their strategy, as BuzzFeed just broke, they were putting talking points out, and Jen did a video on this a little bit. They were putting talking points out that basically was saying, well, the New York Times investigated it and found there's nothing to it. So just point to the New York Times. And by the way, he did a very similar thing, obviously a much, much different story. He did a similar thing about his son Hunter Biden's, allegations of corruptions against his son and him, because his son was getting paid $50,000 a month to sit on a Ukrainian board, and his son probably couldn't spell Ukraine, let alone knew anything about natural gas. Obviously, the son of the vice president making bank because the country was trying to influence the Obama administration and Biden. So he said, there's nothing to this when interviewers asked him about it. The Washington Post has looked in this, the New York Times, credible news organizations have looked into this and found nothing. Well, no, that's not quite true. They just said they could not prove that Biden was involved or whatever. Well, yeah, you can't prove that unless there's some smoking gun like Biden and his son in email laughing it up that his son's making plenty of money. But Biden and his campaign, who, by the way, his campaign is run by former Obama people, former Hillary Clinton people, former Bill Clinton people. I mean, this is the Democratic machine of the last 30 years working for Joe Biden. His campaign is also, I don't know her actual title. This is a disgrace. Anita Dunn. I don't know if she's campaign manager. She was promoted when Biden's campaign was kind of rocky. Anita Dunn she worked in the Obama administration as a communications person. She's worked for a lot of Democratic politicians. She's, a spin artist. She's a communications person, and she does a lot of spin. She also, Jen, correct me if I'm wrong on my phone or in Super Chat, didn't she also advise Harvey Weinstein while he was on the receiving end of all of these allegations? Hello? So, Joe Biden's kind of has people around him that are kind of used to representing people that are not exactly innocent. So what's really striking about this is Joe Biden, it came out, they're using talking points, and Jen talked about this a little bit earlier, they're putting out talking points for, potential vice presidential picks to use if asked about this. Congress people, senators, whoever's going to be asked about it, everybody but Joe Biden, because the media doesn't want to challenge Joe Biden on it because they don't want to lose their access because media is corrupt. Basically saying, well, the New York Times investigated this and found nothing. Well, only the problem is the New York Times came out saying, that's not true. I mean, I'm not really giving the New York Times any love here because they took, I think, 2.5, 3 weeks to even investigate it. And remember, it came out that the New York Times, at the Biden campaign's request, took out a very pivotal sentence that basically was alluding to the previous allegations against Joe Biden about inappropriate touching, inappropriate invasion of space. They took that out because the Biden campaign called and, said they were unhappy. So Biden, this is from the New York Times political reporter here. She covers politics. Biden campaign talking points, quote, inaccurately suggest a New York Times investigation found that Tara Reade's allegation did not happen. Our investigation made no conclusion. New York Times spokesperson's response to this scoop by Ruby Kramer of BuzzFeed. Let me just read this. BuzzFeed reported on the existence of talking points being circulated by the Biden campaign that inaccurately suggest a New York Times investigation found that Tara Reade's allegation did not happen. Our investigation made no conclusion either way. As BuzzFeed correctly reported, our story found 3 former Senate aides whom Reade said she complained to contemporaneously, all of whom either did not remember the incident or said that it did not happen. The story also included former interns who remembered Reade suddenly changing roles and no longer overseeing them, which took place during the same time period that Reade said she was abruptly reassigned. The Times also spoke to a friend who said Reade told her the details of the allegation at the time. Another friend and Reade's brother say she told them of a traumatic sexual incident involving Biden. So that's the New York Times. So basically the New York Times is saying, you're going to have to think of something better there, Joe, because you can't use us to say, we didn't clear you here. We just can't definitively say whether this is true or not. And in fairness, I think that's the right thing to say. I don't know if it's true. The New York Times doesn't know if it's true. Most of these situations are he said, she said. There are things we do know are true that do not look good for Joe Biden. And remember, we got 515 people watching. 333 of you have pressed that like button. Can I get another 200 of you to press that like button? It makes a huge, huge difference. So Tara Reade says she made a formal complaint with Biden's office. I don't know the nature of that complaint. I don't know if she complained specifically about the assault or just harassment or whatever, but she made a complaint. It is in the congressional record through Joe Biden's office, and it is currently sitting in Joe Biden's, I'm probably phrasing it wrong, excuse me. I don't know if it's his library or Senate office, archives, or whatever. They're there. Those records are there. Yet Joe Biden's campaign has said they won't release it. Now, I'm sorry. As somebody who dealt with this on a much lower level, I'd want to release that. If there's nothing there, release it, right? In some cases, you might not release things because, even though you are innocent, it could be spun and misinterpreted. But he's running for president. If he says this didn't happen, it stinks to the high heavens that you have materials in your Jen, help me out. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's a library or something like that. They have materials that could be her complaint at the time that they're not releasing. The other thing here is, the Democratic Party, which is corrupt for a whole host of reasons that we discuss every day. Also, we have to get to Trump. I mean, I know I don't really cover Trump that much, but he's basically just telling meat workers, yeah, sorry, you got to go to work, and if you die, you die. We need you to go to work. Tyson workers and others. We're going to get to that. But what's incredible about this is you want to restore the soul of the nation. You're attacking Trump for the corruption, which you're down with. Joe Biden is just from a different era where you do corruption behind the scenes, not as transparent as Trump. But you have potential. University of Delaware. Thank you, Golden Silence, doing the work for me. Whatever the complaint was is sitting at the University of Delaware, where they have archives from Biden's Senate office. They won't release it. Why not? There's two scenarios here. We all know how this goes. Number one, this is going to be a 2-week story. You release whatever it is, you deal with the blows. Or, like Hillary's transcripts, which obviously I'm not comparing Hillary's private speeches to potential sexual assault, but she wouldn't release them, she wouldn't release them, she wouldn't release them. Well, they leaked anyway, and it was much worse for her. Does Biden's campaign think, coronavirus, which obviously is the top story right now, and we're just gonna, people will forget about it? And by the way, if he did this, do they think, again, speculation, I don't have any evidence, but if he did this, there's the potential other women might come out. So they're only making it worse for themselves. And frankly, whatever ounce of credibility the media has, which is basically non-existent, you cannot interview Joe Biden again without this being the first question. I don't care if he wants to do a town hall, his little live streams, which are very difficult to watch. The coronavirus's impact on African Americans, the coronavirus impact on women. That's all great. Totally think that needs spotlight for sure. But no, you're the Democratic nominee. All the media has been, playing the little horse race game about we need to, who's going to be the vice presidential pick. No. This is not, they say the lesser of two evils. We cannot now bog ourselves down on the lesser of two rapists. If he is a rapist, that is not, and I know, I've even heard from some people that just want Trump out. Well, look at Trump. Okay, but do you know anything? Because Trump's campaign and Trump himself, the gift you could give Trump, and Hillary Clinton was a gift for Trump, the absolute best gift you could give Trump is having corruption yourself that he has. Because then you cancel out his own corruption, or in Trump's case, 13 or 14 allegations of sexual assault and harassment. He's just going to throw it in your face and muddy the waters. That's what he does. Remember, at the debate, first Hillary Clinton, he had Anita Broderick and all these other people in the front row. You don't think that's coming to a lesser degree here? So I think this needs to be a major story. Of course, the media, I'm not trying to suggest this is a bigger story than 60,000 Americans dying and, this gross, capitalism meets death. Elon Musk is tweeting out, reopen America, rework America, restore America. And we're turning a pandemic into a giant culture war with these Republican governors like, don't tread on me, we want the right to go die by going back to work when the death count is piling up. It's insane. And I want to show you a clip. From last night, which shows you, even when they do cover it, CNN's not happy about it. Sorry, I didn't get a chance to load this before, so the screen's going to go black for a second. But this is Erin Burnett from last night. To be fair, I don't know. She does kind of look like she's not feeling well. I don't mean that in a derogatory way. The last few nights I've seen her, it looks like she's sick. So I hope she's okay. I really do. But watch this clip where she's interviewing this reporter. See if anything stands out to you.
Now, so this account purportedly told to Lacoste within a few years of this alleged assault is the first time that we are hearing on the record and detailed corroboration of Reade's allegation against Joe Biden. Now, Reade's brother has told us that there was an incident at the time that he was aware of. He didn't know the full details. And a friend has also told CNN that she was told about the alleged assault at the time, but she is not willing to go on the record.
So, MJ, do we know why Lacoste is choosing to speak out now?
Well, Lacoste says that she and Tara Reade lost contact for many years after the mid-1990s, and that conversation she actually hadn't thought about for all of those years. A few years ago, she says they got back in touch, and last year when Tara Reade mentioned Joe Biden, Lacoste said, I remember that conversation that we had in the 1990s, and more recently, she says that she told her ex-neighbor, I'm willing to talk publicly about this conversation that we had.
Again, to be fair, it does look like she's sick. I don't know. I hope she's not. But what's incredible to me about there's a lot of incredible things. That wasn't the full segment, but what's incredible about that to me is a few things. Number one, CNN, Erin Burnett, if you watched the whole segment last night, acted like this was like a new breaking story. Like this woman's allegations was a new breaking story. It's not. She's been trying to get the media to listen to her for, it seems like, 6 months to a year about the assault portion of her complaint. But her interview with Katie Halper was, I think, at the end of March. She's been saying this now for almost two months. So, end of March, no, a full month it's been out there in the media. So there is, I could tell you, and Jen could tell you, there is a certain arrogance with CNN, New York Times, Washington Post, when independent media or progressive media breaks something. Oh, well, that's not a name brand. I don't know who that is. She has a podcast, so poo. Back to our ass licking of politicians. But this has been out there. The Intercept is not really, is a well-known outlet. It gets picked up quite a bit, even in corporate quarters. So CNN and these other outlets trying to frame this as like just breaking. A woman is alleging this. No, just breaking like a month ago. Okay? You didn't cover it for obvious reasons. Secondly, in that segment, that's not the full segment. You could go watch it. I watched the whole thing, so you don't have to. They didn't even mention the fact that Tara's mother called in to CNN in 1993 on Larry King Live. They're claiming we don't know if it was her mother. Well, her mother lived in this part of California that the caller called in, and Tara said, that's my mother's voice. And Tara said before that her mother called in to Larry King Live. So how do you leave that out, that her mother called in to CNN? Kind of comes off like you're trying to just hide the full damage here. Chuck Zlatkin, $4.99 in the super chat. University of Delaware said it won't release Biden's papers until 2 years after he is out of public life. Oh, how convenient is that? I don't know what is that standard? Jen sent me, University of Delaware refuses to provide agreement detailing why it can't release Biden's records. Shocking. And back on Anita Dunn, who I was talking about, is one of Biden's bigwigs. Former Obama advisor Anita Dunn helped Harvey Weinstein strategize before the New York Times story. So remember, the media was just up Bernie Sanders behind about those meanies supporting him on Twitter, those Bernie bros and girls. But nobody wants to ask Joe Biden about putting Anita Dunn at the top of his campaign, who was just happening to do the spin for a convicted rapist, Harvey Weinstein. Gotta love that balance and consistency with the media. So the bottom line is this. Oh, and Erin Burnett, when she says, why is this coming out now? First of all, I'm not a woman, but that's like the go-to. Like, well, why is this woman coming out now? As Biden is the nominee. Why is she coming out now? And now the journalist is echoing that talking point. Well, first of all, there's two reasons why the neighbor is coming out now. Number one, because CNN didn't do its job. And CNN didn't lift a finger. Not just CNN, but the corporate media didn't do its job to, see who her neighbors were, contact them. An investigative journalist with Business Insider, sorry that I'm blanking on the name, credit to him, he broke the story because he did the legwork and found the neighbor and got the neighbor to go on the record, which, by the way, is not easy. I could tell you it's very difficult to get people to go on the record. It's a process. For our Flint story, it's been difficult to get people on the record, and sometimes in the Flint bombshell we just broke, took over a year to get someone to go on the record. Not for the whole story, but a specific part. But that's why the neighbor is just coming out now, because CNN, with its wealth of resources, spends more time on Trump's tweets and bullshit than on investigating possible assault and corruption. That's why. The second reason, I could only speculate, Tara Reade said, well, I didn't want my daughter as a young kid to have to deal with this and have the trauma of this becoming a big national story. So I waited till my daughter was older to reveal, the allegation of being assaulted by Joe Biden. Again, I don't know if Joe Biden did it or not. I'm removing what I think about him politically. I don't know whether he did it or not. What I do know, University of Delaware, they're not choosing on their own not to release this. Obviously, there's some communication here between Biden world and this university, which I think made Joe Biden like an honorary professor, and obviously Biden is big in Delaware. University of Delaware is not doing this on their own. Secondly, again, there's documents that could add to this story. They won't release them. It's only going to become a bigger story. And then let's pivot for a second. I don't want to make this political because potential sexual assault, very serious thing. Bernie Sanders, are you sticking with this endorsement until Joe Biden answers for this? I mean, say what you want about Bernie Sanders. A lot of people aren't happy with him. I'm not happy with him right now on the capitulation. I've discussed that with you. I don't think he's a sellout. I don't think he's a coward. I think some people are going too far on that end. But, you suspended your campaign. There's a difference. You didn't formally say, ever again. And these are extenuating circumstances. So Bernie Sanders, if he wants to be a leader on behalf of women, on behalf of just people, he needs to publicly say, I think Joe himself needs to speak to this and clear it up if there is something. It's not enough just to, believe, Kristen Gillibrand. I wonder what Al Franken thinks about this. Kirsten Gillibrand came out yesterday, I support Vice President Biden. Well, that's fine. And other Me Too, I would call them seasonal Me Tooers. They are believe women when it's against Brett Kavanaugh and Republicans, but if it's against Joe Biden, we're glad she got to tell her story, but we support Joe Biden, and to hell, he doesn't have to answer for it. No. Bernie Sanders and other progressives need to come out right now. Yes, I agree, Trump needs to be taken out, but there's two problems with that. Number one, if this continues, it's only going to help Trump anyway, so you're not helping Biden by shielding him from this. And number two, we can't, as a progressive movement, we can't have a standard of the lesser of two potential rapists. I don't agree with that. So I'd like to see Bernie Sanders come out and definitively say, we need to hear from Joe, And if we don't, I'm weighing my options. I think it's time, Bernie. I think it's time. So I want to pivot, and we got 633 people watching right now. A true challenge to the 633 people. I'm going to challenge you to stay, because I'm moving on to something that we just broke. And I want to explain to you why this is important, even though it might not affect you personally. As you know, Jen and I have broken several bombs in the Flint water crisis over the last 2 weeks. The first bomb, let me find it here. First bomb we broke was with Vice 2 weeks ago. Why would my Twitter work while I'm trying to show you something? Where we broke the story that former governor of Michigan, Rick Snyder, his chief of staff, his treasurer, and his right-hand man were all secretly subpoenaed by prosecutors in the Flint water investigation. Snyder himself was under aggressive investigation. Snyder was warned about the toxic water in Flint a year before the water switch, so he got warnings about the dangers of using the Flint River as a drinking water source. He also became aware of the Legionella outbreak that killed as many as 115 people in October 2014. That would be 16 months before he told, 16 months earlier than he told Congress. We also broke news that Snyder's right-hand man allegedly issued payoffs to several Flint residents to keep them quiet and not go to the media and not be publicly outspoken against the Snyder administration. Bottom line, read the story. We broke a major, major story. And honestly, the media, just like they have really taken a vacation here on covering the Tara Reade allegations, the media, it has been a epic battle to get the national media to cover what we broke. We did break it with Vice, which to my knowledge is a pretty reputable outlet. But still, we have gotten national journalists, national editors telling us, oh, this is kind of a local story and we're busy with the coronavirus pandemic. I explained to them, oh, gee, I didn't know that the biggest environmental cover-up of the 21st century was a local story. Thanks for letting me know. I also brought to their attention that there is a link to the coronavirus because right now there is literally an 11.5% death rate in Genesee County. Flint is part of Genesee County. 11.5% death rate in Genesee County. Guess the percentage of the cases in Genesee County are from Flint. 50% of the cases are from Flint and Flint Township. Now, Flint Township the whole part of Flint Township wasn't on the Flint water, but a lot of parts of Flint Township was on the Flint water system. So when you add Flint and Flint Township together, 50% of the cases in Genesee County are from Flint. And the 11.4% fatality rate in Genesee County is significantly higher than the U.S. rate. Last time I checked, it was 5 point something U.S., so that's 6 points higher. So why do you think Flint is making up the half of the cases in Genesee County, which has over 400,000 people that live there? Maybe because all ages are severely compromised and vulnerable to this. So we before we broke this story today, we reached out to the Attorney General of Michigan, because obviously in all of these stories we've tried to be fair. Governor Snyder never responded to us, and others that we investigated never responded to us. But if you don't know, in Flint, there was kind of like a Robert Mueller, so to speak. There was a special prosecutor who was tasked with the Flint water criminal investigation because the Attorney General's office didn't want to investigate the state, so they offshored it to a special prosecutor. That special prosecutor was working for the previous Attorney General, so technically the previous Attorney General / special prosecutor had charged 15 state and city officials, including 2 of the top officials. Then, when the new Attorney General came in, Democrat Dana Nessel, she fired the special prosecutor, some of his investigators, and then later she dropped charges against 8 defendants, including the 2 highest level state officials, the health director, the health department's director, who was a cabinet member for Governor Snyder, and the chief medical executive. She dropped those charges, essentially pointing blame at the previous prosecutors, which, whatever. I'm not going to get into what I think about that. So we started looking in the statute of limitations for misconduct in office, which is a felony, passed on Saturday. Saturday was the 6th anniversary of the Flint water crisis. It was also that day the statute of limitations for felony misconduct in office. In response to our Vice story, the Attorney General's office came out basically saying that, well, there's a misconception, basically talking about our report, that the statute of limitations is Saturday. We didn't report that the statute of limitations for all charges was Saturday. Felony misconduct in office, yes, because it's 6 years in Michigan is the statute of limitations. So the Attorney General's lead prosecutors on the criminal investigation, they met with Flint residents last year in June And those prosecutors, her prosecutors, told residents we're up against the statute of limitations in 9 months, which was Saturday. So I don't really know what that statement was about, but putting that aside, so we started looking into the Attorney General's office. Again, they say they're still actively investigating, but we found some things that, leave it to you if you think this might be a potential conflict of interest here. Days after the statute of limitations passed with no charges, we did this for the Detroit Metro Times, myself, Jen, and Detroit journalist Charlie LaDuff, who's a great journalist out there. We worked together on this. Metro Times has uncovered new details that may suggest potential conflicts of interest close to Nessel in relation to the water crisis. Nessel is the Attorney General of Michigan. Metro Times learned that Nessel's communication director, Kelly Rossman McKinney, a former Michigan Senate candidate and longtime Michigan PR guru, who was dubbed the Democratic half of the bipartisan Michigan PR firm Truscott Rossman, advised two of Governor Snyder's ex-Flint emergency managers, Darnell Early and Ed Kurtz, along with ex-Flint Public Works Director Howard Croft, on the water crisis. Darnell Early, let me just break this down for you. Darnell Early, who was appointed by Governor Snyder, and Ed Kurtz, who was appointed by Governor Snyder. Again, she consulted, apparently pro bono, PR, crisis communications, what have you, consulted them on the water crisis. Darnell Early was charged with felony crimes. So was Howard Croft. They were both charged, Ed Kurtz wasn't, with felony crimes by Nessel's predecessor, Bill Schuette, and the special prosecutor, and Nessel dropped those charges. To be clear, we are not saying by any means that Nessel dropped the charges because her communications director had done work for Governor Snyder's administration or emergency managers he appointed. However, this would look to some like a potential conflict of interest. Let's go on. The work was previously reported on by the Detroit Free Press as Rossman McKinney giving pro bono water advice to Flint without identifying the recipients of her advice. She was a big PR person, so obviously advising public officials on what their public statements should be, what they should not be saying, spin, they call it. Two of the officials Rossman McKinney advised, Early and Croft, were charged by Nessel's predecessor, AG Bill Schuette, in 2016. He was Republican, with false pretenses related to the KWA bond deal, which was allegedly fraudulent. Remember, Flint was on the Flint River temporarily while a new pipeline, the KWA pipeline, was being built. In 2019, Nessel dropped those charges alongside Flint's water charges pending against 5 other defendants. Rossman McKinney's role as AG Nessel's communications director, while the AG was dropping charges against 2 defendants that Rossman McKinney had consulted for, poses a political problem for Nessel. Former Genesee County prosecutor Arthur Bush tells the Metro Times, quote, "The political problem obviously is if she, Nessel, has advisors that were working for the other side, Snyder, of the team, it definitely doesn't look good. If she, Nessel, has somebody that's cheering against her from the inside of her office, that kind of begs the question why she doesn't wall that person off." To be clear, he didn't say there was any legal conflicts where Nessel where Nessel was disqualifying herself from the criminal investigation. So I want to show you just some of Rossman McKinney, who is the Attorney General of Michigan's communications director, some of the consulting she did for Rick Snyder's administration. She, quote, "The issue is out of hand," Rossman McKinney wrote to Snyder's chief of staff, Dennis Muchmore, in February 2015 regarding the water crisis fallout. "I'm concerned about the implications that the water crisis, may have racial overtones." Nearly a year later, she issued a tweet in response to a Vox News article suggesting Flint's lead poisoning wasn't a race issue, except in Flint, where all kids, regardless of race, are at risk. I mean, technically, yeah, white and black children were at risk of lead poisoning, but I mean, Flint's 53% black, so I guess I would say more black children were greater at risk. The Snyder administration's relationship with Rossman McKinney's firm seemed to go both ways. In November 2015, Snyder's press secretary, Sarah Werfel, joined Rossman McKinney's PR firm as vice president of public affairs. This is really important here. Before joining Nessel in the AG's office, Rossman McKinney publicly spoke out in support of Snyder and against AG Nessel's predecessor, Bill Schuette's charges against Snyder administration officials. Hey, Jen, do you mind just going into that call we're supposed to have and tell them I'm going to be a little bit late? I sent you the link yesterday. So Rossman McKinney, who is the communications director for Attorney General Nessel, who, by the way, they are possibly investigating Rick Snyder, we don't know. She tweeted out in 2017, ridiculous overreach in relations to Nessel's predecessor charging Snyder's top cabinet official with involuntary manslaughter related to the water crisis. So she's been public. She did not support charges against officials in Snyder's administration. As we're showing you, she was consulting the Snyder administration during the water crisis. Rossman McKinney also endorsed the belief that it was flaws in government bureaucracy that led to the water crisis, not misdeeds or negligence by Governor Snyder. Here's a tweet. Karl Rove praises one tough nerd, Snyder, for stepping up to the plate to fix the Flint water situation. Says wasn't Snyder's fault, but bureaucracy. Rossman McKinney tweeted on March 4th. That talking point, which ironically is usually created by PR people like Rossman McKinney, I mean, Snyder used that talking point in interviews with Morning Joe and other places that, it just was the left hand of government, didn't know what the right hand of government was doing here. So she also, not a crime, free to donate to whatever politician you want, but Attorney General Nessel's communications director donated $700 donated $800 in total from 2010 to 2019 to Governor Snyder. This is interesting because Attorney General Nessel, when she was a candidate for office, criticized the special prosecutor, Todd Flood, who again was kind of the Robert Mueller of Flint investigating, criticized him for having a conflict of interest because he had donated to Snyder. I think he donated $3,000, I think it was, to Snyder. So she said Flood had a conflict of interest and then fired him when she became Attorney General, but her communications director donated to Rick Snyder in addition to the public statements supporting him. There's also the fact that it seems her communications director has a chummy relationship with Snyder's wife. In 2013, Mrs. Snyder, Sue Snyder, was a surprise guest at a Truscott Russman company event, which was her company before she became Attorney General Nessel's communications director. And also, Rossman McKinney tweeted out this photo of her and Governor Snyder's wife with Shinola watches, which I was told are pretty luxury watches. To be fair, Rossman McKinney's partner or former partner, PR partner, said this was an event with hundreds of people. But the point is, clearly, there was some relationship here personally. If you're having Rick Snyder's wife as your special guest at company events, you're, showing off luxury watches with each other. So I don't have time to read the whole thing. We're going to put the link in the super chat. Interestingly enough, when I went live, Attorney General Nessel started responding to our story on Twitter, which I find super interesting because why didn't you respond when we reached out to your office? So it just seems kind of strange and kind of like you're making public statements, responding to our story, not before the story goes out, which is kind of like normal journalistic procedure, but after the fact, in a way to try and divert media attention away from our story to your statement, which frankly is what they did with our original bombshell story. They issued a statement the next day without actually mentioning our story, but it was in response to our story, which a lot of media outlets, instead of covering what we found in our story, just cover the Attorney General's statement. So it kind of looks like that's what's going on here. I assume somebody from the Attorney General's office is watching this. I'd love to interview her. I would love to be fair to Attorney General Nessel. I've tried to be. I don't have any evidence, or I'm not saying, and we're not saying, she's corrupt in any way, or she has dropped charges in any way due to who is in her office. What we are saying is there was no disclosure of her communications director's previous ties to the Snyder administration, and there are potential conflicts of interest, not based on what I'm saying, based on what a former county prosecutor is saying that was quoted in the piece. So let me just read you her response. Reading published reports which imply I may in any regard have ordered that criminal charges be dropped in the Flint water crisis because I may be partial to former Governor Snyder or his staffers are as credible as suggestions I urged Harbaugh to throw the Michigan OSU game. I'm not exactly a Michigan sports aficionado, so I don't know what she's talking about there. It would also mean that Prosecutor Kim Worthy was my co-conspirator in this effort. We didn't say or allude to that, but okay. So one would have to believe that we lifelong Democrats who have never had any ties to Snyder or his staff decided to essentially throw 100,000 Flint residents under the bus, solely because my communications director had contacts with persons of interest to the investigation years before we worked as the AG's office together. I'll let other people decide if her doing crisis communications for the Snyder administration is contacts. I'll let other people decide whether it's that minimal. Any such suggestions defy reason, common sense, and are absurd at best. While my office would never stymie or pursue prosecutions against an individual based on political motives, I have spent the last decade excoriating Snyder and his actions as governor. It's one of the reasons I felt it best to select a position on the civil side of the conflict wall. Again, they put in a quote-unquote wall that we have a leading Flint activist on the record kind of saying as a joke, but they put a wall up between the criminal side of the investigation and the civil side. And the Attorney General has said, I'm not involved with the criminal investigation, and there's a strict wall between the criminal investigation. She assigned the Solicitor General of Michigan to lead that, and the civil side. I spoke with a county prosecutor who said he's never heard of something like that, an attorney general recusing herself from the criminal side of an investigation. Usually these situations, an attorney general will kind of offshore the civil side of the investigation so that she could handle the criminal side. To suggest I would instruct anyone to protect Snyder or his staffers is fantastical thinking and is wholly lacking in logic of any kind. It's also deeply offensive. I ran on the promise of delivering justice to the residents of Flint. It is absolutely fair for the voters of our state to judge my success or failure as Attorney General. On whether I delivered on that promise, only time will tell. I look forward to the completion of the investigation of this matter. I remain confident that Prosecutor Worthy and Solicitor General Hammoud will ensure that justice is done. Couple things, and then I got to go because I'm late for a call. Number one, the only thing I'll say respectfully to the Attorney General is we reached out to your office. We reached out to your communications director. She did not respond. She forwarded our questions, which were fair questions, to the, over the wall into the criminal side of the investigation, and they basically didn't give any real answers, only that Kelly Rossman McKinney, your communications director, obviously couldn't answer your questions. I don't know why she couldn't answer our questions. I don't know what her conflict would be in answering our questions about her previous work for the Snyder administration. We also had a question, was she advising you during your campaign? Because it's not clear whether she was your spokesperson during the transition, that month and a half between winning election as Attorney General to becoming Attorney General. She was your spokesperson then. So we asked, well, was she advising you during your campaign? Because during her campaign, Attorney General Nessel had made some critical comments about the previous prosecutors and their investigation, which, ruffled some feathers. And according to our reporting, defendants were cooperating with the previous prosecution team. And then after the Attorney General candidate, Dana Nessel, made those comments, they kind of clammed up. Oh, well, it seems like she's going to make changes, so let's wait till the new Attorney General comes in. So to be clear, I would like to interview you if you or any of your staffers are watching. Want to be fair, obviously. That story, I don't really understand the tweet, because we're not alleging you're corrupt. We're not alleging you dropped charges because of corruption. The story very clearly suggested there could be potential conflicts of interest if your communications director, who to be clear is not a prosecutor, but communications director are usually involved with advising the politicians they are doing communications with. She publicly supported one of the potential targets of the investigation. She publicly criticized your predecessor's charges against Snyder officials. She donated to Snyder. If you read the story, there's other things that might be concerning. I think conflicts of interest federally, we've become numb to the gross conflicts of interest in our federal government and on the state level. I'm not numb to them, and I think they should be reported on. So the only thing I'll say, Miss Attorney General, I would have loved for you, those tweets, would have loved to get those so we could have added them into the story. It gives off the appearance we weren't fair to you, but we were. We reached out to you. We didn't get a response. Just like we didn't get a response for the original story. The main response we got was essentially, due to the coronavirus, we're fighting coronavirus or something like that, so we can't answer your questions. I don't really know what the Attorney General's office is doing to fight coronavirus. I thought that was the health department, but whatever. So, bottom line, we're going to continue reporting on the Flint water crisis, on the investigation. It's one of the biggest environmental calamities of the 21st century. The fact that 6 years later, residents and many Americans alike, 6 years later, the fact that nobody's even faced trial, let alone in jail, is concerning to people. And frankly, there's not been a lot of explanation for substantive explanation of why major charges were dropped, as well as the Attorney General's office. Of course, they're not going to reveal confidential matters related to who they're looking after or the progress of the investigation, but they haven't really gone into specifics on matters to Flint residents. So we'll continue investigating. Again, the offer's out there if the Attorney General wants to do an interview. I'd of course, be fair to her. So that's it, folks. I got to run to a call. I'll be back tomorrow live. If you can, no problem if you can't. Times are tough for everybody. If you can, please, please, please show us some love. We're almost at $100,000 raised in our GoFundMe. I think the minimum is $5 for GoFundMe. This is helping us report. This is helping us do the investigations. Jen and I are also trying to reach a point and a funding threshold where we could hire a third person to be a jack of all trades. We need help with marketing, social media, research, publishing. We need somebody to do a little bit of everything. So we're trying to reach a funding threshold to get somebody, even if it's just, on a part-time basis. So definitely support us at GoFundMe, Super Chats. Really appreciate it. We will see you tomorrow. Peace out.